So the story picks back up after the death of a nation's hope, and we learn that Toby's death didn't stop the withering, and it's only gotten worse. Wow. Just a frame one punish on the entire audience with that one. You know, if you want the audience to think of this group of cultists as anything other than a collection of bumbling klutzes, letting them be right about a single thing would be a great way to start out. Rachel also brought Faith with her to discuss the demise of Toby Sorelli, which means that Rachel trusts a 5-year-old more than she trusts Eric. You can at least trust Eric to not get lost in a hallway, because that's what Faith does. Faith is suddenly missing, despite the room only having one exit and 2 people looking her in the eye as she blinks out of existence. Now, if you were paying attention in the other story route, you might want to pipe up and ask, wait, didn't this exact same thing happen in the Norway section? Yeah, that one started out with Orson going missing, right? Well, you've just unlocked the dirtiest secret of Silent Hill Ascension. See, I can understand wanting to make the 2 storylines parallel each other, but they don't really parallel as much as they do copy. These 2 storylines are the same storyline. They're both about a child going missing and their mother trying to find them, going through all sorts of hellish visions to get them back. Heck, it doesn't even stop there. Look at the 6 characters the game marks as main characters at the beginning. You have the strict mother, you have the spineless wimp, and you have the drunk. The 2 stories are based around the same 3 central character archetypes going through the same story, with only minor tweaks made to make them anything other than carbon copies. Eric is a little bit more self-confident than Carl. Rachel is a lot more unlikable than Astrid, and Toby is only a little bit more dead than Brett. Do you want to hazard a guess as to how fun an experience it is to bounce between the same story over and over again, with the only difference being how close they are to the Heinz factory? It's not even necessarily a bad idea, it's just more annoying when you finally make the connection and realize, wait a minute, you bastards, you only wrote 1 story! So Rachel has lost her faith while Eric Oh, I get it now! I don't get it. Eric is taking out his impotent rage on a washing machine when he gets a call from Toby! Don't get too excited, it's a pre-recorded message.
Should be enough for you to go to the Silver Pines and buy everybody around on me. When you do, make a toast. Tell them that Toby Sorelli said they can all go themselves.
Dead or alive, Toby's still the best character in the show. I knew it! Of course, he left this task to Eric, so the resulting performance is lacking a certain something.
Hey, I need to say something. Next round's taken care of. Courtesy of Toby Sorelli. I'm pretty sure he's never coming back here, but he left a message for all of you. Go f*** yourselves.
Yeah, fuck him too. My cousin died because of that asshole.
Toby Sorelli said you can all go F yourselves! I don't like Toby Sorelli. Oh my god, I'm so sorry! Please don't tell my wife I said that! Eric flips people off with his ring finger and watches Scooby-Doo with the lights on. While he's failing his best friend's final will and testament, Rachel is getting boots on the ground to try to find Faith, when she runs into this guy, who, in my notes, I just called Dogman. Dogman is shockingly like a Silent Hill protagonist doing a post-game side quest. He's trying to find his dog and explains to Rachel in very clear and robotic terms about how the Foundation manipulated his sick wife until she died, and how they just want control over people. This was a process that Rachel was likely involved in given her status. It's an interesting idea to face Rachel with somebody she's wronged who isn't angry or bitter, and to make her question her own conviction and faith. The conversation is cut short, of course, by him getting ripped to pieces by dogs, but at least he started a conversation. Rachel is tasked with going to find Eric, which she doesn't really want to, cause she thinks he might blame her for losing their daughter, which he will because she did. He's busy at the laundromat again, and who the hell is using these machines so much that they're always breaking? I have no idea what this town looks like or how many people are in it. Who needs this place so much? I mean, aside from Eric to hide out from his wife. Foundation member Krista comes around, though, and inherits just an ounce of Toby's will, as she hates Rachel with every organ in her body, and tries to let the secret slip on what might have happened to our High Archmage. Unfortunately, the Withering hates snitches, and unleashes a Silent Hill on them. They still have not said the words Silent Hill in this show. Eric gets wrapped up for a minute before Krista comes in with the assist, as this broke-ass Withering can be shooed away with a broom.
Wait, what the hell was that? Where did it come from?
Ask your wife.
Okay, I'd prefer Toby, but Krista is a damn fine substitute. Eric goes from one monster to the next, as Rachel is actually angrier at Eric than she is about her child being missing. This whole scene just reestablishes the pecking order that Rachel thinks dirt of Eric, while throwing in the extra bonus that she's through with the Foundation. Of course, the next place they're going to go to is the Foundation. So they head back to the cult hideout, only to find that now Xavier is missing too, and they're not allowed to do anything until he gets back. Rachel says, yes, please, let the monsters eat my baby. Eric, meanwhile, realizes he's in Loopy Land. He calls Rachel out for saying that she hates the Foundation in one scene before following their words to the letter in the next. The show is listening to me, so if I scream louder, I can probably revive Toby. Eric briefly powers up into a decent human being and points out what a horrible bully Rachel is, how she killed Toby, and how waiting for Xavier to come back isn't gonna do anything. Now, going out to search also isn't gonna do anything, but it's the thought that counts. Eric's search begins by making flyers to hang up in convenience stores. How long has she been missing that you had time to whip these up? Really, time is impossible to measure in this series, what with all the fog and how it never changes from day to night, so let's say 3 years he's been searching. He gives the flyer to the most create-a-character ever created when Krista rewards him for standing up for himself by talking sense back to him. It's a dead language in these parts.
Be honest. Between you, me, and the corn chips, don't you wish Rachel was here with you, searching for Faith? I know that if it was my daughter missing, I wouldn't be able to rest.
She's not resting.
Oh, right. She's waiting for Xavier to magically return with your daughter.
We all cope in our own ways. She leans on her belief in the Foundation. I'm out here searching.
You don't have to search alone, you know?
So what? You're offering to help?
If you want the company.
I thought you hated Rachel.
Doesn't mean I hate you or want to see your daughter hurt. I'm a bitch, Eric, not a monster.
Dude, what the hell? Why is there only one good character allowed to be in the story at a time? So Eric and Krista team up to go find Faith, while Rachel finds this prick. Xavier is sitting in a chair, looking sad, and pretending to be in a coma so he doesn't have to talk to Rachel anymore. He left a note that said if he were ever to be trapped in a quiet mound or something like that, control of the cult goes to Krista. And then he drew a little picture of Rachel at the bottom with stink lines coming off of it. He says Rachel can't be trusted because she just wants power and control, which is kinda true. I mean, maybe there's some off-screen stuff going on, which is a great way to tell a story. Tell or show? Fuck that. Don't tell, don't show, imply. Anyway, we do get to see through Eric that she's an overbearing witch of a woman, but without any other evidence, the only thing I can think of is that she really wants to be controlling and powerful, but sucks really bad at it. So just does it to Eric, which is like bullying a stuffed animal. Krista, meanwhile, is courting Eric to the light side by telling him what he's been desperate to hear vocalized for years, in that Rachel is a horrible monster and the worst person he could be with. Her evil, wily seduction tactics really boil down to just asking Eric if he's doing okay and listening to him when he talks. That damn Jezebel! While Eric gets an upgrade and looks for his daughter, Rachel has spent just as long yelling at Xavier about how Krista is a poo-poo head and shouldn't be in charge. Now Xavier, and this is kind of an important detail, I think you should understand this, can't hear any of this. She is arguing with the wall, and it's hard to say the wall isn't winning. You want to know the funniest part of this whole plot line? I don't think anybody ever tells Krista that she's in charge, so the idea she'd abuse her power is rendered moot. But where is she during all this? Well, she's out looking for Rachel's kid, while Rachel realizes that cult leaders lie. Back with Eric, and we've got a dead Toby on our hands, and frankly, game, I don't like being reminded. He finds Xavier wandering in the Withering, mumbling a whole bunch of bullcrap that don't mean nothing to nobody, and he manages to snap Xavier out of his haze by sharing the trauma of losing his mother when he came to America. It doesn't work. And then he gets beaten up by a monster, and then it works. He is not attacked by the monster. The monster beats him up. It's a very important distinction because it makes Eric just that little bit more pathetic. Now that Eric has rescued Xavier, he realizes that Eric was actually the super-duper cult special baby, not Rachel, and tells Eric that he's a healer, and that he has the power to stop all suffering forever, and that Rachel doesn't have near the amount of power he does. Rachel, after sharing the spotlight for 2 minutes with the person she decided to spend her life with, has immediately considered ripping her own eye out to get Xavier's attention. This lady, named Lady, gives her the teachings of Paul Radcliffe, who founded the Foundation, and hasn't been correct about a single thing so far. And it says to fight back against the Withering and get the site required to find her daughter, Rachel needs to make a sacrifice of either her or Eric's eye. While she thinks about which eye Eric would miss the least, she gets flung into the Withering to meet Astrid. As we said last time, nothing of note is ever accomplished in these crossover sections. If you're looking to cut some fat from your 5th rewatch of Silent Hill Ascension, these are probably the first place to start. I've watched this 5 times. I have watched this series 5 times! Xavier begins to riz Eric up by sharing his own dead parent trauma. Oh my god, you have a dead mom? I have a dead dad! They should date.
I've suffered too. My father was murdered right in front of me. Someone shot him in the chest, mistaking him for a thief who had just robbed a bodega.
I'll never forget his final words to me. Put it down, you little bastard, it's loaded. Eric notices that this guy is getting way too attached, way too fast, and tries to pump the brakes. But Xavier says that it's either he joins or dozens, potentially millions of kids will be eaten by the Withering. Rachel boops back into reality at such an awkward time, as Eric is talking to Krista, and basically says nothing that could incriminate him in Rachel's eyes. All Eric is saying is that he's glad Krista wasn't torn to pieces by dogs, and to Rachel, that is one of the highest forms of treason he could do. Rachel starts to have a moan about nobody caring about her daughter anymore, despite being on that list of non-carers, talking to one of 2 people who actually wants to find her. She even throws an insult at the only other person trying to find Faith, before bringing up that one of them's going to go as a pirate for Halloween and they have to nut up and pick who it'll be. Completely out of character, Rachel decides to be selfless and gouge out her own eye, without so much as a bandage on hand to clean up the mess. This scream is not the scream of somebody cutting their own eye out with an old dirty knife. This scream is, the remote is all the way on the other arm of the couch. The other members eventually bust down the door and see Rachel, knife in one hand and eyeball in the other, as she gets told how stupid she is and how this was the worst decision she could have made. I don't know, I thought it was pretty funny. For her crimes against brains, she's sent off to a kangaroo cult court to see if she's still worthy of being a part of this. But when she gets there, she finally turns the tables and says, "You can't fire me, I quit!" Yeah, that'll show 'em, Rachel! Good to see she got out of the cult before doing something drastic like stabbing her own eye out. Oh, wait. Yeah, if her faith really was faltering like she claimed it was, I think she could have pulled out before pulling her eye out. Instead, it comes off way more like Rachel is upset that Xavier yelled at her, rather than losing her eye for nothing. How do I know that? She still hasn't bandaged it up! There's a crap load of withering just pouring directly into her skull through this open wound. Even though Krista is a card-carrying member of the No Rachel's Club, we meet on Sundays, even she speaks up and says that Rachel isn't all that bad. But it falls on deaf ears, and she leaves. Xavier, meanwhile, after screaming into her eye wound and threatening to kick her out, immediately tries backing down, as soon as he sees that she really is gonna leave. But it's too late. She's a stay-at-home mom now. Only problem is, she still doesn't really have a kid to look after. Oh yeah, the cutting her eye out thing didn't help her get any closer to her kid. The plot refusing to move forward has started to negatively impact the character's health. Xavier, meanwhile, goes back to trying to get Eric to take off his pants by telling him a secret technique to ward off a withering. Sex. Yep, he lets Eric know that if he wants to get his daughter back, for some reason, an option had always been just having sex. Well, Eric is perfect for this. He has a wife after all, but I got a question for you. How do you get your shoes on in the morning being this dumb? No, Xavier is shipping the members of his cult, and sends Eric off to go try and get Krista. Now Sex and Silent Hill get on like a house on fire. Silent Hill 2 and 3 especially, with all the birthing symbolism and frustration James feels with Mary's situation, are ripe with sexual imagery. But there's something so Ascension about the way Ascension handles it. A show where every scene is directed, scripted, acted, and performed as weirdly as this one is not capable of getting across whatever this idea of physical intimacy warding off evil is trying to tell. Honestly, any interesting idea this game has usually falls on its face when it comes time to actually deliver, simply because the groundwork for a competent series isn't there. You get stuff like Rachel and the Dogman's conversation, Ava's reveal in the Norway storyline, and it starts off interesting, but it doesn't take long for the whole thing to fizzle, because the whole package that is Silent Hill Ascension washes over you like a bucket of cold water. It just can't do it. There are ideas that are neat in theory, like Xavier behaving like a legit cult leader, taking people aside and gassing them up with loads of affirmations and positive thinking to make them feel special, while secretly manipulating them. But that's all it is. It never serves a deeper purpose or gets used in any interesting ways. You get the setup, but none of the payoff. You notice it and mark it as a positive because it's one of the few times the show doesn't trip over its own shoelaces, but it doesn't lead to anything. The show never tests Xavier on how much he really believes his own teachings, so it leaves this giant black hole in the center of his character, where you can't really judge if he's a legit preacher or a sleazy con man. The show never gives you evidence to suggest him in one direction or the other, because there is nothing to say. They didn't make any evidence because they didn't decide. A common criticism that gets levied against Silent Hill Ascension a lot is that it was AI generated. People think that there's no way that people could have written something this bad. It had to have been a computer taking bits and pieces and then merging it all together, with the prompt being, make something kind of like Silent Hill. The dialogue is usually what people are talking about when this criticism comes up. They hear it and say, there's no way that whoever wrote this has ever spoken to another human being. And it is usually very stilted and awkward, but another aspect that it ties back to is the pacing. Reading any amount of AI-generated content will let you see that it's very good at building stuff up, but then just forgets about the payoff. And that sounds a lot like Silent Hill Ascension. Thankfully, there's not a need for speculation about it, because Genvid came out and said, no, we're not using AI generation, this is all the good work of our writers. Imagine being so bad at your job that people say you have to be a robot. For my part, I don't think Silent Hill Ascension was AI generated. Not because, AI could have done it better. It fucking can't. I think it mostly comes down to a confusing format that takes a story that could make sense and breaks it up in such an unnatural way that leaves it completely indecipherable. If these were 2 5-hour-long miniseries instead of one 10-hour-long series, I could see it coming together to form something that does make sense. But because we bounce so often back and forth between one story to the next, it means that you have no time to remember what actually happened. That's what creates the disconnect. That's what makes it seem so unorganized. The writing is still very, very bad, but I'm not gonna chalk it up to AI. I know I haven't said a huge amount about the prospect of getting down and dirty in Silent Hill, but what do you want me to say? You know Silent Hill. God, I hope you do, or else this is gonna be a great jumping on point. This is such a ridiculous concept to introduce to Silent Hill. Xavier tells Eric he needs to talk to Krista and convince her to have sex with him, so you know the next scene with him is just gonna be a barrel of laughs. Rachel, meanwhile, is taking her dishonorable discharge well and has truly one of the weirdest scenes in a while. See, my new favorite character, Steve Angelical, comes to the door and asks Rachel if she wants to join the Foundation. This is a door-to-door cult salesman who doesn't recognize a super important and high-ranking member of the cult, who just had a huge falling out with the leaders, who just got a very identifiable facial marking. Well, how do you do, stranger? I'm pretty sure this guy was in the meeting. This guy is so chipper and happy to sell his weird death sex cult that he doesn't notice the murder dogs surrounding him. And despite being out an eye, Rachel does. Sit the fuck down for this next part, so Rachel shuts the door on him and holds it closed until he dies. Remove any personal animosity towards Rachel. You're going to hell. Okay, you gotta understand, you're going to hell. Pearly Gates of Heaven, closed. It did, however, open whatever hole Faith fell into because she's home now. Safe and sound and out of her mind. Now starts the funniest arc of Silent Hill Ascension, and that's the Rachel hostage arc. See, Rachel got her kid back. Great! Only problem is that while she was gone, she too inherited the Sorelli blood and spends the entire time she's home crapping all over Rachel and how horrible she is. Rachel is given no quarter as Faith relentlessly tears her down all the time for how she spent more time at the cult than she did at home, how horrible she is to Eric, how she doesn't understand anything and just bullies people to get her way. It is so satisfying to see. Rachel, meanwhile, has her daughter back, but can't stand the sight of her. There is such palpable contempt between mother and daughter that is a joy to watch unfold. Rachel is trying to find any excuse to abandon this kid. And frankly, she isn't wrong for doing it. She has gotten quite a bit more knife-happy since last time. Does any of this sound familiar, though? Because around this same time in Norway, Astrid also gets her son back. And her son also turns out to be a crazy knife-wielding maniac. But how does this arc end? How does the storyline of Rachel getting her kid back wrap up? Well, the dogs, finished picking Steve Angelical's bones clean, break into the house and start attacking Faith. And you thought what she did by holding the door shut was bad? Rachel sees these 2 dogs threatening to rip her daughter in half. She apologizes and runs out of the house! She abandons her daughter in a house alone with 2 dogs that not a single episode ago stripped a man down to the bone! Her daughter is begging for her life and pleading with Rachel to save her, and Rachel would rather run away from 2 dogs without even trying something. I've seen her kick. She has a nasty forward tilt, but instead, she runs away. I can't hold it in much longer just how much I hate Rachel. I don't think I've ever hated a fictional character before, but now I have one. I can give her a little slack and say that some of the inconsistency is down to the choose-your-own-adventure style. You can't rely on the audience to always make consistent choices. But let's ignore the actions. and focus on her base personality. Rachel is an aggressive, temperamental time bomb who has so much scorn and hate in her body for everybody around her that it rots her insides. That would be one thing, and it might make an interesting villain, but she is a central character. The entire Pennsylvania plot hinges on her, so we can't even get rid of her without being left rudderless. Rachel is so scornful and angry, but ultimately she's just as spineless as Eric. She just looks so much bigger when she's next to somebody as meek as him. You look at what she can really do on her own, and it's not a lot. She isn't persuasive, she isn't charismatic, she isn't strong of body or will. She's helpless. That makes a lot of her anger and outbursts feel even worse, because she can only do it to people she's placed beneath herself, like Faith and especially Eric. When a character comes around, like Krista, other cult members, or Xavier in particular, she's toothless and rolls over to whatever they say. It positions her as nothing but a bully, picking on weaker people until somebody with some authority comes by and schools her time after time. Her cowardice is especially dumbfounding in the scenes where she lets Dogman and Steve Angelical die. But this scene is so bad, it's too much to bear. Why did she cut her own eye out as a show of how badly she wanted Faith back if she couldn't stand being in the same room as her for more than a few minutes? Sure, I showed you the scenes of her being a creepy kid because it's funny, but there are just as many, if not more of her, just wanting to play with her mom. The kid is genuinely making more of an effort to connect with her mother than the mom is. And then to just run away when she needs her the most. Her life is on the line. Rachel is supposed to be the parallel to Astrid in the Norway story, but she's really closer to Carl. The absolute worst part is that the story gives her a pass every single time. It will waste no time giving Eric his 10 lashes for how much of a wimp he is. But it never frames Rachel the same way, despite her cowardice arguably being worse. When you look at how Eric's cowardice affects the world around him, you see that it almost always only affects himself. He's only putting himself out because he can't stand up for himself. When it comes to Faith, though, he'll stand up to anybody because he loves his daughter. When you look at Rachel's cowardice, though, it comes at the death of several people. Dogman, Steve Angelical, and now her own daughter! Seeing her get away with abandoning her kid is such a horrible way to treat the audience, showing one character as bulletproof, unaffected by the consequences of her own actions. Eric is not much better, trust me. But at least he's off busy getting busy. Now, this does pretty much negate any high ground he could have had about Rachel cutting her eye out if he's willing to drop his pants at the drop of a hat. But even then, he actually has more ground to stand on. Speaking of Eric, it's time to get back to him. Yippee. He talks to Krista about doing the merging ceremony, but she tells him she'll only do it if he really wants to. And when he shows any hesitation, Krista backs off, since she knows it's not what he wants. It's a shockingly competent look at consent in a game that I expected the worst from, so props for that. Xavier, unfortunately, though, can't exactly see the good in it because he needs somebody to have sex, and now. Also, just to make sure this doesn't get uncomfortable as Eric isn't being forced into doing this. His problem is more so with cheating on Rachel. It's not that bad. He then tells Eric he's gonna be the satyr in a cult-wide merging ceremony. And we're there. It's time to discuss the Silent Hill-themed orgy. Anytime going forward that I do say something positive about Silent Hill Ascension, just imagine that it's going out of my mouth and falling directly into a big bottomless hole, because it gets eaten up. Doesn't matter. This show is evil, and I hate it. Sucks real bad because there's a moment after this I actually have nice things to say about. Eric contemplates what to do about the satyr and merging ceremony and all that jazz when his inner voice starts to talk to him. And the voice is Rachel's. He envisions her as berating him, belittling him, and calling him less of a man. rubbing it in his face that she probably did this before and just never told him. It's a shockingly honest voice and really reflects how Rachel makes Eric feel, which really speaks to a deeper lack of self-worth in Eric that he rents out to Rachel to tear him apart from the inside. This never manifests itself into much more than a scene or two where Eric says he's never talking to Rachel again, before backing down, but it's at least an idea. He does, however, go along with the orgy, and it's a boring-ass orgy, Snork! Me. You hear this is the Silent Hill game with an orgy in it, and you get super excited, but it's kinda just shoes rubbing together. The whole reason some people would watch this show, and it's the biggest letdown of them all. Honestly, I'm so sorry I hyped this up as anything. I feel personally responsible. Also, judging by whose shoes are where, it looks like Xavier is the only person fucking Eric at the orgy, which... it's embarrassing, but I don't know for who. Xavier just wanted a sex cult with lore, didn't he? So, did this help Eric find faith? Huh? Oh, yeah, sure, that's what this was for. Just, let's go get some air, and I'm sure she'll... Oh, damn, it worked. Yep, Faith's back. Except it wasn't Rachel's eye or Eric's butthole that made the save. No, it was a good Samaritan. Rachel tries to play it cool, like she didn't leave her daughter to become dog food. But Faith breaks the mold for this series and actually remembers what happened in a previous scene, wanting to stay away from Rachel and stick with the new lady, Nora. For her good work in returning Faith to her family, the Foundation kidnaps her and locks her in a dark, dingy room where they kill people in, so they can, withering. Just because it was a sex thing once doesn't mean it's always gonna be a sex thing. Eric is grilling Nora over how suspect it is that this lady shows up out of nowhere with his daughter after weeks of her being missing. Concrete statements of time! Anyway, real rich coming from Eric that Nora looks weird, since him and the rest of the cult f***ed in this room not 20 minutes ago.
I'd be stupid if I didn't have some concerns.
Fair enough.
You know when you're listening to the dumbest person you've ever met prattle on about stupid stuff you don't care about, and you just say, oh, fair enough, as a sentence filler to look like you're paying attention when you're really just playing Goku vs. Vegeta AMVs in your head? I think that's what our friend Nora's going through right now. Rachel, Eric, and Faith are all back under one roof. And what a big happy family we got here. Kid's got a knife, wife's got a problem, and Eric. Did you know his real name isn't even Eric? Yeah, it's Alonzo, and he changed it to Eric when he got to America. You're supposed to find out this information in the same place that you find out that Krista used to be a beat cop in Norway who worked with Haugen. Where is this information supposed to be? Eric says he wants to be where he's appreciated, and Rachel takes that as a threat, because it means he's gained a level of self-worth she spent years stomping out. Faith, despite watching her mother choose herself over her child, is still just trying to be a normal kid who wants to play. But, like a caring mother, Rachel only ever talks to her to tell her to get out of the way. I'm honestly shocked the kid's as well adjusted as she is, knife and all. Eric and Rachel get into a fight over whose worthless sacrifice was worth more, Rachel making a hole or Eric filling one. Rachel decides to end things then and there with Eric. They're not married anymore, and they're just staying together for Faith. Now, it's important for you to know that she does not, nor does she ever learn that Eric has fucked everybody that they know, nor does Eric ever figure out if Rachel has done the same. This is a story about a horribly toxic relationship that the abuser decided to end because their victim got too much independence, doing something that she was already doing before leaving. And the abuser is the hero of the story. Faith hits the world's saddest gritty as I see in the background there's a fold-out couch bed. Oh my god, Eric is sleeping on the couch. Can we please get Husband Protective Services to come and save Eric? Rachel, meanwhile, gets a visit from Xavier, who's horny for something new now, proper nouns. He's spouting off Withering, Ascension, Purifier, Blight, and Aspirant before he's even closed the door. And I'll tell you right now, as the 5-time champion of watching Silent Hill Ascension, I still have no idea what about 3 of these terms even mean. I know withering, and I can guess what the purifier is, but the other 3? Not a goddamn clue. Eric, meanwhile, is busy trailing Nora. After letting her out of the basement they've been keeping her in, but he's so bad at everything that she finds him out almost instantly. Eric finally asks a single question about Nora, where he learns that she came to town to find her brother, who's been sending her messages, despite being dead for years after dying in the steel mill incident caused by Toby. You know, they're usually not so blatant with it. Like, killing your wife isn't a Silent Hill exclusive concept, but getting letters from a dead loved one who you know for a fact is dead, leading you to a town with spooky supernatural elements? I mean, come on, you're not even trying to hide it! That's note for note the inciting incident from Silent Hill 2. And you know what? I'm thinking about it right now. She gets stranded in town after a car crash, like Harry Mason from the first game. Oh my god, she was locked in a room like Silent Hill 4! And she's a girl like Heather from Silent Hill 3! Nora is the ultimate Silent Hill protagonist. She shall conquer all! I actually like Nora as a character quite a bit, because she gives us something that we have bafflingly been missing ever since Toby got shot in the head. And that's somebody who doesn't know what's going on. When Xavier is spouting off Aspirant, Blight, Ascension, nobody asks, what are any of those? Because nobody in the story like that exists. Because everybody in the story already knows what those words mean. Eric could technically be this character for us, but he's Eric. Nora, meanwhile, will say, "What's that? Who are you talking about? What's going on? I hate it here."
It can't be a coincidence that she came here looking for her dead brother and found my daughter instead.
Unless she's the one who took her.
Eric, this is likely the woman who stole your little girl from her home. And you not only didn't tell me she'd left this building, but you've allowed her to sow suspicion among us.
Guys, this show looks sus. I think this show is sus. This show is looking pretty sus. All right. So Rachel takes Faith into the woods with Xavier to become an aspirant, and correct me if I'm wrong, which you can't because I'm the authority here. I know everything. What are you gonna do about it? Watch the show? I think not. Anyway, is Rachel stupid? She showed no signs of ignorance or confusion about what Ascension or an aspirant were, so she knew exactly what the ritual entailed. Why would she bring her daughter here? She knew Xavier intended to kill her, so why bring her out here? Rachel at least got her going out eye patch on. Very classy. Rachel uses CQC to kill Xavier, and out he goes. The Ghoul Lord's here to pick him up, though. Love this guy. Okay, so Rachel just killed somebody in front of her daughter. This kid is gonna be so poorly adjusted, it's gonna wrap all the way back around to being good parenting. Oh, by the way, Xavier is dead. So Rachel is dragged into hell for the multiple murders she's committed, and Faith goes back to the Foundation, showing Krista her favorite game that her mom hates. So Rachel and Astrid tag team kill a monster with a few stick whacks, which is enough to get out of the withering as she's back to what she's usually doing, running through the streets screaming for Faith. She eventually makes it back to the Foundation and finds Barbara, the high-ranking Foundation member. She confesses to a murder and learns about the Heretics, a splinter cell from the Foundation that wants to spread the withering instead of stopping it. The next few scenes are a truly frustrating lot, both in their content and how to showcase it, because it's just characters going to find someone, they find them, they don't know anything, and they leave. This happens, no joke, 6 times in a row! This is like a week's worth of content and there's nothing! How is there filler in a show that's only 5 minutes long? Anyway, it turns out Barbara is the heretic after Rachel pegs her as one immediately, but gets thrown off when she says, "Well, if I was the heretic, why would I tell you they existed?" That's not rhetorical either. That's actually a great question. Why did you do that? You could have coasted by, waited for Rachel to rip out her other eye, and then fall down a manhole. Her and her identical twin sister in Norway, who definitely lost the rock, paper, scissors game on that job, stole her and Astrid's kids to amplify their family's natural despair, to bring out the withering, and then sell real estate? Rachel got caught up in a spooky multi-level marketing scheme. She'd fall for it. Unfortunately, Rachel's side smash is strong enough to knock out Barbara and leave her trapped in the Hernandez family basement. This starts an equally goofy arc to the Rachel hostage arc, as characters take turns coming downstairs, one after the other, and saying, "Ooh, ooh, I'm gonna getcha, I'm gonna getcha." No getcha-ing occurs. Rachel threatens to shoot her, Eric threatens to kill her, Faith threatens to kill her but wrong. This is the first family bonding activity they've done all series. Oh, and the way this arc ends? She says untie me, Rachel says no. She says please, Rachel says yes. She says punch, Rachel says ow. She says stab, Rachel says ow. They go to withering, and Barbara dies. And the other sister melts. You know how much fun it is to try to summarize a story that doesn't tell you half of what happens? It makes you sound like the crazy one. So Eric is kinda lost without Xavier or Rachel to yell at him, so he decides to run around town with Faith and cause some trouble. See, the withering's gotten so bad that demons are kinda just walking around like they own the place. So everybody's held up in their houses, with Nora keeping a small community safe in the bar. Eric asks for her help. She remembers the closet she was stuck in for weeks.
Listen, I know you're angry, but you need to get over it and move on.
Oh, that's what I forgot to do. Eric doesn't realize he was the problem all along, because as soon as he steps foot inside of the bar, the demons break in and murder everyone. Except for him, Krista, Faith, and Nora. And Krista got lost on the way to the front door, so now she's AWOL. Rachel finally makes it back to town, only to take a baseball bat to the back of the head! And live. Krista hit the home run and needs her help to ascend, because man, it's gotten bad out there. At this point, we gotta try something. Rachel doesn't want to, due to the grand slam to the head she recently suffered, but Krista lords it over Rachel that all of this is her fault, because she killed Toby's sister Joy at the beginning of all of this, and started the withering. Yeah, you probably don't want that getting out. A real messy scene follows that, where no one really gets what they want. Rachel says don't trust Krista. Krista says Rachel caused all of this. The big winner of this scene is whoever made this create a character with the loudest shirt in the entire series. That shirt wasn't enough to save her though, as once Rachel meets back up with the rest of the gang and Faith screams in her face that she doesn't want to go with Rachel, every single Foundation member is slaughtered by monsters, save for Krista. It looks like they're next, until it's revealed that Faith has the power to control the monsters, and demands everybody bows to her. Why would I waste my time making something this dumb up? If you want to know how bad things have gotten, we have a child using psychic powers to beckon Silent Hill monsters to kill people, and yeah, I think I'm just gonna let you guys draw whatever conclusions you want from this, and whatever you thought of, I agree with it completely. To the guy who's popping off thinking this is the coolest thing he's ever seen, don't worry buddy, I'm right there with you. I really can't exaggerate much for effect here. Faith starts commanding the monsters and kills a lot of people, just like every remaining cult member save for Krista. So we're down to a countable amount of characters left in Pennsylvania. Rachel then manages to step up and calm Faith down out of her bloodlust, and get her to stop murdering people. Completely against everything they've shown the entire series up until this point, now Faith wants to turn to Rachel for comfort. Ay vey, there is no good way to transition into this one, but the bias this show has towards Rachel through the lens of motherhood is one of its most baffling qualities. Rachel is given carte blanche to do whatever she wants because of the show's strange pseudo-theme of motherhood, which is never expounded upon any more than establishing that Rachel is a mother. Eric is a way better parent to Faith than Rachel is. He tries to be understanding, accommodating, and even when she's gone, he is trying as hard as possible to save her, and doesn't stop searching until his legs fall off. The story, though, treats Rachel and Faith as the ultimate endpoint, for no other reason than she's her mother. It shows time and time again that Rachel doesn't want and is unqualified to raise Faith. And Faith hates her mother's guts, probably because she saw her slip out the door while she was being murdered. It's this weird messaging that's put out there, whether intentionally or not, that mothers are more deserving of their child's love than a father by default, regardless of their actions. I think that while the bond of motherhood plays a massive part in it, ultimately, once you have to raise the child, and you do as poor a job as Rachel, the kid has no reason to not hate your guts. The child does not owe the parent love that they were refused, and Rachel has shown none of that. That's on top of the messaging that divorced couples should stay together for the sake of the kids. Dude, if the only time she sees you is when you're arguing, that's just gonna be worse. Just cut bait and hit bricks. You know how much Eric wants to keep Faith safe? He's ready to kill 2 intruders for trying to steal her. Don't think the comedy is lost on me that Eric finally stands up to Rachel because he feels like a big man with his gun. Listen to me. Finally stands up for himself. I feel like Eric's finally stood up for himself like 6 times now. I know where this is going. He's gonna fall back. Every new episode of the show is a damn rerun. Eric says Krista's convinced the remaining Foundation members, who, I think there's like 3 of them left, that Faith is a demon. What evidence do you have to the contrary? Because I got about 50 corpses that support her argument. Rachel, talking like a goddamn crazy person, says they can use Faith as a way to get back into the Foundation and have them worship her as the new god. Before Eric can toss Faith out the window away from this insane person, Nora, of all people, shows up and picks a fight with both of them. See, the letter she got from her dead brother said she would find her killer in the house they grew up in. And Eric and Rachel's house was her house from when they were kids. So now Nora is convinced that one of them is responsible for the murder of her brother. Okay, mild spoilers, she's double correct. And when we get to it, you're going to have to just go with what I'm saying and try not to doubt me. Because this series somehow saves its biggest nosedive for the very end. I'm talking character-shifting revelations in episode 21 of 21. Faith throws a hissy fit and sends them to the Withering to cool off, as they meet up with Krista and Astrid from the Norway story. Acknowledge her at your own peril. So, 2 random creative characters who don't show up before or after this tell Rachel and the others that the Great Empath is coming, and that it requires fingers to use as keys to open up the Dark Gate. Is the Great Empath the same as the Purifier? Asking that question means you lose the game. Sorry about that. Rachel and Krista tell them there is no Great Empath. The gate is a bad thing, and they all stink big time. That leads to the creative characters feeling real silly. Oh man, we were totally gonna stab you and bathe in your blood. Say, let's let it all go, right? Blood under the bridge. Rachel returns to her natural state of not knowing where Faith is. Well,
Let's face it, the world's gonna be better off without me. So I'm gonna finally do the right thing.
Toby! Game. It's just nasty when you do that to me. With Eric and Nora alone, Eric finally opens up about what happened at the steel mill. This is a mystery we've built up all show, and we're finally gonna get to hear what it was. See, Toby has always been a drunken wreck. That's what makes him so charming. One day, while he was supposed to man the safety panel to the mill, he passed out drunk. Eric tried to fix what Toby broke, but it was too late. Because of Toby, everybody in the mill was burned to death. I don't believe you. Toby's at his best when he's pissed drunk. Efficiency should have gone up. Rachel, meanwhile, has gone 100% batshit insane because some more cultists come demanding fingers as keys, and Rachel knocks them out and proceeds to start chopping their fingers off one by one until they give her faith back. Rachel, these are nobodies. These are Koopa Troopas. Calm down. Eric sees her mutilating these people and finally sees the woman he married again. Krista says she's been studying the teachings of Radcliffe, a man who hasn't been right a single time, and can perform an ascension to save Faith. All they have to do is go back to where it all started, the mill. Krista confides in Eric that Rachel's soul is so goddamn heavy with sin that she's likely to not ascend. Eric is relieved at the news and asks Rachel if she'll take care of Faith if anything happens to him during the ascension. This goddamn awful woman does not answer him and leaves. At this point, I'm just wondering if The Withering is a cover story for a mass murderer named Rachel. The Scooby Gang heads back to the mill and finds Faith on the floor, cause not even the Withering can keep a tight grip on this slippery kid. As the team splits up, Eric and Nora go to turn on the furnace to the mill, while Krista and Rachel stay behind to do the ascension. And here is where the entire Hernandez clan begins to crumble. Nora is pressuring Eric to go faster, but he shoots back that he doesn't know how this panel works. This was Toby's job. He never touched it before. And then Nora hears what he just said. Wait, but you're the one who stopped the furnace, right? After Toby overheated it. How do you not know how the furnace works if you've turned it off? For the final time, Eric crumbles and reveals the truth. Toby was drunk at the wheel and let the furnace overheat. But it was a containable accident. Eric saw the situation, though, and panicked and started pressing buttons wildly to make it stop. That's what caused the furnace to explode and kill all the factory workers. Toby didn't kill anybody. Eric was the one responsible. Then he framed Toby and let him take all the blame. Nora is rightfully disgusted with this mouse of a man and leaves as Eric is face to vagina with the monster that killed Joy. He's able to escape and ends up back in the bar, where...
Hernandez? How the hell are you, man?
Toby! Oh my god, it's really you!
Whoa,
Toby Sorelli! The pyromancer has returned. Oh my god! Toby and Eric get to see each other one last time, and Eric tells him that he's so sorry for everything. For the mill, for Rachel, for Joy, everything. Oh, it's getting better! Choke slam! Choke slam! Toby does not forgive Eric. Faith tells her father that he is a monster for what he did, and the vagina monster finishes him off, as Eric is no more. I love this screenshot. Me and my family gather around this on holidays. But what about Rachel? Well, she and Krista do some stuff or whatever, but Nora again, the Hernandez killer, bursts in with a stack of letters and throws them in Rachel's face. Every single one of them was addressed to a family member of someone who died in the mill accident, including Nora's brother. She found them all in Rachel's house and demands to know what's happening. Rachel breaks down and admits she was planning on sending them all out to the different family members to bring them to Hope's Junction, most likely to prey on them and get them to join the cult. The biggest thing, though, is that she was actually involved in the steel mill incident, just not directly. See, Rachel was an accountant working at the mill, which was failing badly. She couldn't risk looking bad, like she was part of a failing company, and so needed a way to make the mill look better before selling it off to a new owner. She pumped the numbers by forcing the workers to work unpaid overtime. And on the night of the incident, she barricaded all the doors and fled town, which meant that when the victims tried to escape, they couldn't, and were killed in the blast caused by Eric. Rachel is the death of Joy. Quite literally. Did you know we haven't actually talked about how Rachel orchestrated Joy's death as a cover-up for her failures to cure her addiction? Yeah, she was supposed to be Joy's support. She couldn't help, so summoned a demon to whack Joy and bury her mistakes. That was a totally different horrible thing I don't have time to cover because of all the other awful stuff she does. I've made my feelings known. She is a glass tiger. All the ferocity, none of the strength. She's weak, ultimately useless, and a self-serving backstabbing monster. What other reason would she have to do this if not to try to use their suffering for her gain? If she brings in all these grieving, vulnerable people into the Foundation, she's bound to become the most respected person there and have total control. This is someone willing to manipulate an entire community of grieving family members she destroyed for her own gain. In the most generous way you can interpret this without trying to make Rachel look any worse than she already is, this is someone who tried to profit off of slave labor and then further profit on the resulting tragedy. Then when the blowback threatened to personally affect her, she shifted the blame onto somebody else. That could even be a facet of Eric and Rachel's relationship that explains why Eric put up with so much. Eric is subservient to Rachel because she has blackmail over him. She stood to gain everything and lose nothing, since not even Eric knows the full scope of what she did since she lies to even him about it. Put aside that at the last second the Hernandezes are fighting over who gets to be a mass murderer. Eric at least has incompetence on his side. The aftermath, different story. But Rachel made the conscious decision to lock dozens of people in a volatile, failing steel mill with no sleep, no food, no water, and work them to the bone to make a spreadsheet look nice. What the hell was Toby supposed to do? Not get drunk at the post when he's being forced to work well past his limits in a burning hot steel mill? Of course he was gonna pass out. Silent Hill happened because an accountant had a bad day. How is the child who commands the armies of hell the least evil member of this family? Instead of facing punishment, consequences, or even judgment for what she did, instead she gets to be the only one of the main cast who gets a happy ending. What an absolute joke. If you want to try and deny this show has a bias towards moms, Rachel is a great rebuttal, because she gets away with a lot of murder with no blowback. Anyway, Rachel sticks her head in a hole and gets to be the only survivor alongside Faith, a child she promised to throw in a dumpster as soon as Eric died. Judging by the ending, we're catching her in the act. Summarizing my thoughts on Silent Hill Ascension isn't easy. Okay, that's a lie. My thoughts are very simple and also expletives. What I mean is that I've watched this entire series so many times from front to back, and yet I feel like a summary is kind of pointless. You've heard how horrible it is. I've given you a beat-by-beat run-through and almost every problem you thought of while listening. Trust me, I thought the same thing. Even if I didn't say it, it was probably just not worth bringing up. I have no fondness for this show. It's a chore to watch and a bigger chore to try to make sense of. And now that I have watched it more than anybody living or dead, I can say this next part without a shred of doubt. Silent Hill Ascension has zero value. You do not get anything from watching it. It is not an experience that will leave you feeling positive. It will be a confusing slog that leaves you wondering what the intended route even was. I would kill to see a director's cut of this show, with what the makers consider to be the canonical route, just to see where we f***ed it all up for them. And don't even think I'm gonna be talking about Silent Hill Ascension What If, because Toby dies at the exact same point, so it's not worth the paper it's printed on. It feels so weird to come away from a project this big feeling nothing. Yeah, it's a crappy show, but at this point, watching it so much just leaves it washing over me, and I'm sure that by your time watching it, you'll feel the same. I've been asked a lot in my several watch-throughs of Silent Hill Ascension, is this show good if you like so bad it's good content? No, it's boring as shit and 10 hours long. That's just the nature of interacting with something through a purely negative lens, though. It's fun in the moment to laugh at how bad it is or get angry at it, but those sorts of emotions dwindle very fast, in a way that joy and optimism don't. If you're hate watching something at a point, you're just gonna get used to it, and it won't be astonishingly bad anymore. it's just gonna become sludge that oozes into your head and leaves a bunch of slime around that makes you feel all gross. There was a point where I realized that I don't enjoy talking negatively for a long period of time, and I've made a concerted effort to try to talk more positively. Of course, I'll still cash out that goodwill to talk about something like Silent Hill Ascension, but largely I've tried to avoid just being outright negative, because it's not good for you. If we want to talk about optimism, though, there is actually a light at the end of this tunnel painted on a wall. Genvid has released a trailer for their next series, based on DC, and oh my god, it looks really good! The animation work on this is absurdly fun, and the fight choreography is so fluid and interesting, with a really cool art style to match. Of course, I have my reservations. A lot of stuff on the writing and monetization side need to change before I throw my weight behind it, but my overdeveloped sense of empathy hopes that maybe Genvid just got screwed over with a bad production cycle, or harsh deadlines, not enough money, or just some bad writers, so that I can hopefully blame Konami. But I really do hope that the next time I talk about a Genvid production, it can be in a much more positive light.